All right, today we're going to do a deep dive into SAP. This is a true titan of enterprise software, and it's sitting at a really critical inflection point. We're going to look at the anatomy of a corporate giant trying to reinvent itself for a whole new era. Let's get into it.
I'm Munfet, and my goal here today isn't to sell you on anything. It's to dissect the situation. We're going to take a sober, analytical look at SAP's strategy, the challenges it's facing, and the key questions that are really going to define its future.
Now, before we really get going, I have to be crystal clear about something. This analysis is for informational purposes only. It is not, under any circumstances, investment advice or a recommendation to buy or sell any security. So, here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with SAP's historical power, what I call the enterprise fortress. Then we'll look at the cracks that started to appear in that foundation. After that, we'll dive into their massive cloud migration, look at the impact of AI, and we'll wrap up with the key questions that are still on the table. Okay, first things first. To really understand where SAP is headed, you have to appreciate the sheer scale of the fortress it built over the decades. This isn't just another software company. For its customers, it's basically critical infrastructure.
Just let this number sink in for a moment. 99 of the world's 100 largest companies run on SAP. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. It's the operational backbone of global commerce.
And to be clear on what we're talking about, an ERP system, it's not just another app you install on your computer. Think of it as the company's central nervous system. It connects everything: finance, HR, supply chain, you name it. It is absolutely mission critical.
Now, for decades, their business model was frankly a thing of beauty. They charge a huge one-time fee for a perpetual license. Then they collect these incredibly sticky annual maintenance fees year after year. The result? A business fortress with gross margins floating around 90%, a true cash machine.
This quote really says it all. This gets to the heart of their competitive advantage. The switching costs were just astronomical. Ripping out an ERP system is so complex, so risky, and so expensive that you just didn't do it. That inertia locked customers in for decades.
But, even the strongest fortress can develop weaknesses over time. And the very things that made SAP so dominant eventually created what I'd call a gilded cage. It started to hinder their ability to evolve.
And here's the real paradox. SAP's product was so flexible, the client spent decades customizing it to their exact needs. But all those customizations were baked right into the core product. Over time, that turned it into this brittle, rigid liability. Upgrading the system became this dreaded, multi-year ordeal.
And of course, that kind of stagnation creates an opening. A whole new generation of nimbler, cloud-native competitors started showing up, chipping away at the edges with better products for specific tasks. So you have to ask yourself, was the fortress becoming a prison?
This all brings us to 2019. The leadership knew something had to change. So they kicked off this bold, you could even call it aggressive, strategy to completely reshape the company from the inside out.
And make no mistake, this strategy is a forced march to the cloud. It started with a new CEO with a cloud-first mandate. Then came the big one. They announced they would end support for their old on-premise systems by 2027. They literally put a deadline on the old way of doing business. And just this year, they began a huge internal restructuring to get everyone aligned with this goal.
The scale of this whole thing is just monumental. As of today, more than half of SAP's entire customer base still hasn't made this transition. So on one hand, that's a massive execution challenge, but on the other, it's a huge pool of potential revenue growth.
So, why are they going through all this pain? What's the financial thesis? Well, it's actually pretty simple, and it's powerful. The core idea is that for every single customer they successfully move from the old model to the new cloud subscription, SAP expects to make 2 to 3 times more revenue from that customer. So let's just unpack these two models for a second. The old world was a big one-time license fee plus maintenance. The new world is a recurring subscription. And this is key. Customizations now happen on a separate platform, which they can also charge for. Now, you'll see the gross margins are a bit lower in the cloud, around 70% versus 90%, but the total revenue you get from each customer is dramatically higher.
And this isn't just some theory on a slide. You can see it playing out in their actual financial results. Back in 2018, that old-school support revenue was 44% of their business. Today, it's down to 30%. And where did it go? Well, cloud revenue has now become the dominant force at 57%. The shift is very, very real.
But just as this massive, once-in-a-generation migration is hitting its stride, a whole new technological force just explodes onto the scene: artificial intelligence. And for SAP, AI is both a massive opportunity and a profound threat. It's a true double-edged sword.
The central debate really boils down to this. Is AI going to make SAP's competitive moat even stronger, or is it going to provide the very tools needed to tear that moat down? The bull case is that AI is the killer app that finally gets customers excited to move to the cloud, especially since SAP is sitting on decades of priceless business data to train it on. The bear case? Well, AI lowers the cost for new competitors to pop up, and this is the big one. It could dramatically lower those switching costs that have protected SAP for so long. And that really brings us to where we are right now. We're not left with a simple, neat conclusion. What we have is a series of critical, high-stakes questions. And the answers to these questions are going to determine the outcome of this whole transformation.
First, there's the migration itself. By forcing every customer to make a decision, have they inadvertently opened an exit ramp for competitors? Just how many of their customers are going to take this opportunity to leave? The customer churn rate over the next few years is absolutely paramount.
Second is the question of culture. This one's a bit softer, but it's just as important. Can a legacy, an engineering-driven company, truly change its DNA to compete for talent and innovate at the breakneck speed of its rivals in the US? That is a huge challenge, and it's one that's very easy to underestimate.
And that leads to the third, and really the most fundamental question of all. Does that old competitive moat, the one built on high switching costs, massive scale, a huge partner ecosystem, does it still hold up in an era where AI might just rewrite all the rules of enterprise software? So in the end, the task ahead for SAP is immense. They essentially have to transform their own impenetrable fortress into a dynamic, interconnected skyscraper that's fit for the future. The foundation they're building on is incredibly strong, there's no doubt about that. But the redesign, it is complex and it is fraught with risk. Success is far from guaranteed. How they answer these key questions will tell us everything.